They buried the truth. The world moved on. But a new piece of evidence has just exploded, and nothing will stay hidden for long. Imagine a lit match in the middle of a dark room. For a few seconds, it dances in the air, as if fragile, on the verge of going out. But then, against all expectations, it touches something flammable. And what seemed about to die reignites with force. This story seemed over. The Julia Wendell case had already been tossed into the corner of internet hoaxes, DNA tests, cutting headlines, mockery. The press assured she's not Madeleine, and the world moved on, perhaps even relieved to close another doubt. But then came a new piece of evidence, silent, almost unnoticed, an analysis no one was expecting, a forensic detail no one was looking for anymore, as if the truth had been there all along, covered by the dust of haste, by the need to conclude a mystery that always stung. And now this new information, small but intense, threatens to reignite what the world wanted to forget. Because if it's real, it's not just Julia's identity that changes. It's what we think about all of this, about how we choose who's worth listening to, about the rush to file away stories that were still breathing. Julia was ridiculed before she could even say her full name. When she came forward saying she might be Madeleine, almost no one wanted to listen. Not with empathy, not with seriousness. She became a joke, a meme, an exaggeration, but no one asked, what if she was right? That pain, the pain of not knowing who you are, doesn't fit in a headline. It grows in silence, and it mixes with the scorn of others until the person starts believing they're wrong for simply wanting to understand their own story. The problem was never her claiming something so big. The problem was that we rejected the question before looking deeply. Today, that flame that seemed extinguished is burning again. And if you're here, maybe you feel that something in this story is still alive. So stay, because when the truth starts burning again, we have to choose. Put it out once more, or feed the flame. If this doubt ignited something inside you, subscribe. Because some stories weren't meant to be forgotten. She didn't ask to become a headline. She didn't ask to be pointed at on the street as the girl who thinks she's Madeleine. But that's what happened. Julia Wendell appeared like a spark in a scene that seemed already consumed by ashes. The world had made a point of bearing the case, and with it, every possibility of doubt. But she went and spoke. In an awkward way, with long pauses and visible pain in her eyes, she said, I think I might be the missing girl. And that was enough to set everything ablaze. The reactions came like punches to the gut. Memes, mockery, sensationalist headlines, talk shows treating it all as a joke. Few asked what drives a person to make such an absurd claim. Even fewer asked what she carries inside to believe it. But even in the face of scorn, a shadow of doubt lingered in the air. It was uncomfortable, hard to face head-on, as if something everyone thought was buried was still moving beneath the ground. Then came the DNA test, released coldly. Negative, they said. Inconclusive, they corrected later. But the damage was done. That girl who dared to touch the wound of one of the world's biggest mysteries was now just another name to be discarded. Most didn't even bother to look again. But if you paid attention to the details, something didn't add up. The source of the data, the way the tests were conducted, the McCann's absence from the process, the disappearance of the doctor coordinating the analyses, the gap in the silence that followed. And at this point, a question no one wanted to hear arises. What happens when a test is used not to reveal, but to close? The truth is, Julia Wendell's case wasn't shelved for lack of evidence. It was shelved due to an excess of discomfort. The public got tired of believing. The authorities got tired of making mistakes. The media got tired of getting burned. And when everyone's tired, the easiest thing is to close it. Slap a resolved label on it and move on. But Julia didn't move on. And that's where things change. Even discredited, she kept saying the same things. Same features, same blurry memories, same marks on her body that didn't seem to fit a coincidence. Time passed, and she didn't back down. On the contrary, she started collecting questions, details, contradictions, information that didn't fit the official narrative. Unintentionally, she became the mirror of everything still unresolved. And when you piece it together, you realize the greatest weapon against her was never a test or a document. It was collective exhaustion, the desire to not touch it anymore, the emotional construction of the official end. Because admitting she might be right would be like tearing up pains the world swore it had buried. But what if that pain is still alive? What if, behind every joke, every sarcastic comment, every enough already, lies exactly what scares us most? The possibility that we silenced someone who was trying to tell the truth. That's where the tension grows. And it's there, in what seemed resolved, that a new spark begins to ignite. Because what seemed like ash was still burning inside. What reignited this flame didn't come from a big headline. It didn't come from a press conference or an official request to reopen the case. It came quietly, a technical detail buried in reports, almost unnoticed, but enough to bother those still paying attention. It was a new analysis, not of DNA, but of something else, isotopes present in hair fragments. And what it revealed wasn't a name, but an origin. The chemical traces didn't match the version accepted as official. On the contrary, they raised the possibility that Julia could indeed have come from the same territory where Madeleine was last seen. It wasn't confirmation, but it wasn't something that could be dismissed with a "this proves nothing." In forensic science, when a piece of evidence raises more questions than answers, it's often set aside. And that's exactly what happened. The report was ignored by the mainstream media. No coverage, no headlines, no public doubt. But in the background, among those who still carry this case in their hearts, the noise began. Did you see this? Why isn't anyone talking about it? Are they hiding it? On the other side of the screen, Julia found out. And this time, she didn't post a tearful video. She stayed silent, as if to say, now it's up to you. You know what comes to mind? The Stefan Kisko case. An innocent man, accused, imprisoned, and abandoned for 16 years for a crime he never committed, all because of a flawed report and a system that decided to close the story too quickly. Years later, the truth came out, but no one was there to repair the damage anymore. I'm not saying it's the same case, but the pattern is similar. When something challenges the official version, it's treated as noise, not as a clue. That's what I felt with this new evidence. As if we were seeing, once again, that invisible mechanism that doesn't erase the truth, but pushes it to the corners until it seems irrelevant. And that mechanism has a simple name: confirmation bias. We believe what we want to believe, and ignore what threatens what we've already decided is true. But sometimes doubt persists and refuses to die. And at this point, as the narrator, I need to be honest with you. There's a question that hasn't left my mind since I read that report. What if what they buried wasn't the body of the truth, but the chance to set it free? Just saying that feels heavy, because this story stirs more than facts. It pokes at places we try to keep closed. The feeling of being deceived, the fear of having judged someone too soon, the unease of knowing that maybe we turned away while there was still something to see. Some things only those who've lived them understand. And it's strange how certain truths only hurt when they fall into silence. But this story isn't over. And what comes next might be the point where everything starts to turn. Because the doubt didn't die. It was just waiting for the right moment to rise again. And here it is. In the midst of exhaustion, in the midst of the dust kicked up by repeated versions, a question insists on standing tall. What if she's right? Not as blind certainty, but as a possibility no one wants to face anymore. Julia Wendell doesn't represent just herself. She's become the reflection of something bigger, of the collective doubt that was never truly addressed as it should have been, of the pain that many learned to shove under the rug just to keep moving forward. Because touching it hurts. And if you stop to think calmly, you'll realize her name became a code. She's no longer just a girl with a confusing story. She's the symbol of the question stuck in the world's throat for over a decade. What happened to Madeleine McCann? That doubt, as uncomfortable as it is, remains lit. Not for sensationalism, but because it was never allowed to be extinguished with dignity. It was smothered, rationalized, ridiculed, discredited, but never truly faced. And when a doubt is treated like that, it doesn't vanish. It burns, in silence. Julia didn't come with all the answers, but she brought back the urgency of asking the right questions. And that in itself changes everything. The metaphor of the flame. Remember? At the start of the video, it was almost out. A reg tos kodo ember. Akit sokan mar nem latak. But now, after everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've confronted, it's there. Intense. Breathing. Illuminating what still needs to be seen. Not just any fire. The flame reignites. It's the kind of flame that doesn't burn on the outside, but within. That doesn't destroy, but insists. And that only exists because something refuses to die. This story, despite so many pleas to be buried, is begging to be rewritten. Not with more theories, not with new culprits, but with emotional responsibility, with courage, and above all, with the recognition that some pains can't be filed away like cold folders in a courtroom drawer. True resolution doesn't come when the truth is accepted by everyone. It begins when someone decides that even without applause, even with risk, they'll keep the doubt alive until it can no longer be ignored. And you know what that takes? People like you. People who aren't here just out of curiosity, but for a kind of justice that doesn't fit in headlines. A justice that starts when we refuse to accept that mystery is synonymous with lies. At this point in the video, I don't have a ready conclusion to give you. What I have is a gesture. A quiet proposal. You saw the flame ignite. Now the choice is yours. Let it go out again, or keep it alive with the little oxygen that's left. Maybe the true ending of this story isn't in this video. Maybe it's in what you do with it after you close this tab. And maybe, just maybe, the fact that you've stayed until now means that the truth, even fragmented, still matters. It's not the end. It's the point where the story demands to be rewritten. Now that you've seen what no one else wanted to look at, the question comes back to you. What are you going to do with it? There's no easy answer when what's at stake is the identity of someone who might have been forgotten by the world or erased by it. Julia Wendell doesn't have all the proof the public demands, but she also doesn't carry mere fabrications. What she has, in truth, is a void, and that void unsettles, because it doesn't fit within the comfortable logic so many insist on preserving. It's a poorly patched hole in the narrative, leaking questions, doubts, silences. For a long time, this case was reduced to a battle of absolute truths. Either she's Madeleine or she's a fraud. But maybe the most dangerous thing we do with the truth is try to put it in neat boxes. The real truth, the one pulsing behind the versions, rarely lets itself be captured so easily. What we saw here was a spark, a sign that the official story, so neatly packaged, sealed, and forgotten, isn't as stable as it seems. The new evidence, the ignored test, the unanswered gap. All of this reignites a flame that never fully went out. It was just covered by the ashes of public exhaustion, of convenient forgetting, of the collective shame of maybe having laughed too soon. It's strange to think about, but sometimes laughter is the most cowardly way to bury what we don't want to feel. And Julia's case exposed that. The headlines mocked. The internet made jokes. Public opinion passed judgment, all too fast, all too safe. And in the middle of that firestorm of disbelief, no one wanted to look closely. But now that the dust has settled, now that the spotlights are gone, something reappears, not as a scandal, but as an intimate, nagging doubt that only bothers those who still care. Maybe what Julia carries isn't a definitive truth, but a possible truth. A truth that deserves to be heard before being discarded. And honestly, after everything you've heard up to now, tell me, are you sure you know who she is? Or do you feel like the story is still trying to tell you something? If some part of you, even a small one, felt that something is still unresolved, then that doubt has already transformed you. It's already put you on the side of those who refuse to accept silence as an answer. That's what the flame represents. This flame that was discredited, smothered, ridiculed. This flame that stayed there, in the back of the throat, when the whole world said, forget it. This flame is you realizing that not every doubt deserves to be buried. And if it reignited in you today, if something here touched what was dormant, then leave a sign. Not for me, not for the channel, but for yourself. In the first pinned comment, there's a space for those who want to say, this flame still burns in me. Just leave your, I sustain this flame. No explanation, no need to justify. Just a gesture, a code among those who refuse to forget. And if you want to go further, if you feel you want to sustain this investigation with more than words, the super chat is open. But look, this isn't about financial support. It never was. It's about belonging. It's about saying in silence, I'm here. I believe these stories need to be told. Because when someone clicks that button, it's not just a donation, it's a vote of confidence. It's a hand raised in the crowd saying, this flame won't die as long as I'm watching. So if this makes sense to you, make your aren't just viewers. They're part of the truth still trying to emerge. And before you go, let me ask you something. Not with urgency, not as a formal request, but as someone whispering something in the dark after sharing a story too deep to end in a rush. Write in the comments. It can be a line, it can be a vent, it can be just a question mark, but write with truth, because if you've made it this far, it's because you felt something. And I want to know what this ignited in you. I'll read them one by one. And if you have the courage, end your message with a simple phrase, not every silence is forgetting. That'll be our code. our way of keeping the flame alive, even after the video ends. And if you want to keep walking this road with me, if you want to keep following stories the world tries to bury, but that still beat inside, subscribe to the channel. But only do it if it's for real, because this channel isn't about entertainment. It's about presence, about people who don't accept the label of closed when there are still unanswered questions. And speaking of questions, in the next video, we'll open one that should never have been closed: the disappearance of Claudia Lawrence, and the detail in the colleague's statement that almost went unnoticed. If this story pulled you in, the next one might break you. But for now, just breathe, close your eyes, and remember, the truth doesn't go out. It persists in the embers of silence. If this flame ignited something in you, keep it burning, because some stories, even when forgotten by all, still beg for justice. And maybe, just maybe, justice begins with those who still listen, with you.